Welcome, friends, to episode 261 of Color Magic, or Magic Gaming Podcast, where we talk about all types of issues that affect gamers at and away from their gaming tables and computers. I'm your host, PowrDragn, and hopefully surviving with all the stuff going on in the world. Still got my main man, Brian Sonic. How's it going, dude?
Yep, going well. I'm still standing. I'm still strong. Is it Antoine Fisher? I was it Antoine Antoine Fisher. It's
Dude, let
somebody
me tell
named
you,
Fisher.
y'all almost lost me for the podcast about 45 minutes ago. I was eating a banh mi and they had some fresh jalapenos on there, and one of them seeds got caught in the back of my throat. I thought I
Oh
was going to be
boy.
done. I was choking and burning. It
Oh
was not
oh.
awesome. So, but I made it. I survived. Crisis averted. We still get to do a show today. So, before we get into the show, like always, be sure to check us out over at patreon.com/colormagic and be a supporter. Help us out. You can get a shout out just like Rhea's Last Stand and Ian Theory. Thank you both so much for being patrons. But let's get to kind of the quick news. I say quick news. This is the big news of the week if you're a Magic player. After all the stuff that happened with the Commander Advisor Group and the RC, the Rules Committee, all that good stuff, we now have the Commander format panel, which I'm sure people go, okay, well, is this just the same thing all over again? Not really. This is Wizards is in charge now, but I guess the best way I could describe it is the opinions of the group are now all on the same level, right? Because I think that was one of the things before that, for better or worse, led to some trouble, if you will, because the RC made some decisions without really all the information and consulting of the Commander Advisor Group, and then kind of led to a big situation. This is more everybody's on the same level. We're being a resource for Wizards. Also, Gavin Verhey is the main point of contact, I guess, for the group. He's the lead of the thing. Still, obviously, Wizards is going to get the final say, but we're getting to do all the work and the research for him and everything else. So lots of things that are different. So top level stuff, it's a bigger group. I believe was our number 18 people. I think it was. Let me do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 18 or 19. Yeah. So pretty big group by comparison to what was there before. Also, they did a good job covering different parts of the world. There's a couple of people involved. I didn't even know who they were till they became part of the group. One of them's from South America, from Brazil, I believe. One is from Japan. There's a couple people from Europe. I think a couple of Canadians. And, there's content creators of different types, people doing TikTok stuff, people doing YouTube stuff, people from different ethnic backgrounds. We have a mix of men and women. We have just a little bit of everything. So I feel like across the board, this is a pretty solid group. If you're looking for opinions on different skill levels, if somebody's casual, the retail level, being super competitive. So it feels pretty good as far as a first step. Also, because it's owned by Wizards now and we're helping them directly make decisions, everybody's on contracts with them and will be paid as well. So that's
That's
also cool.
cool.
Not something that existed before. Because before it was all volunteer, and then you
Yeah.
just took the praise or the hate that came with it for the love of the game, as they say,
Well,
and that's kind of all it was. So yeah, this is kind of a big turning point as far as how things are handled. I did a short Q&A earlier today for people who had questions, but yeah, this is different. So I don't know, Brian, what's your take being on the outside looking? Because obviously I'm kind of in the trenches on all this. But how did you feel about it? And what was the reaction you saw on social media?
yeah, I guess like you said, people trying to figure out how it's different than the other thing because, of course, a lot of people probably really didn't even know the difference between the two things we had before. I probably fall into that category where if you asked me between you were on the committee and were saying, there were like the format committee or the thing. It definitely is somebody that I guess it probably is more on the casual side. It's it's confusing. I guess what is also probably most important thing. What is in place now in terms of protection and from knuckleheads, for lack of a better term.
That's a good question. I think some of the protections, we'll call it, largely stem from knowing that the final decision, regardless of what we tell them or whatever, falls with Wizards, right? Whereas before, if a decision was made, you knew that at least of that combined group, the rules committee was making the decision, right? One of those 4 or 5 people, whatever, like that's where your hate was going to be directed because they were the ones that decided it. Whereas now it's like, well, we could tell Wizards whatever, but if Wizards makes a decision, you know, now ultimately, I would like to think that they will be at least taking our input in and we will help guide the decision. But ultimately, it is going to be Wizards' decision. So that in and of itself helps a lot. But I will say that Gavin has been very forward about, hey, you don't need to answer these questions. You can direct stuff to these people, saying like, hey, if you ain't comfortable doing this stuff, then here's ways to handle it. And then, like I said, even additionally, even coming off the old stuff, I mean, I just got an email last week from Wizards and Reed Pop for Vegas saying like, hey, if you need a space to get away, we're gonna have spots. If you need extra security, let us know. So they're taking all of it really seriously, seeing just kind of, especially right now, everybody's high tension for a lot of things, in society that people do get a little stupid. So they're doing pretty well as far as that goes to kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, keep people shielded as best they can is probably the best way to describe that. But
Which is wild that we need that. As you say, that's just kind of where we are in our society right now.
yeah, you're right. It is disappointing that that's even a thing, right? It's trading cards, it's a game. Shouldn't be something that you're attacking people for. No, not even just attacking, threatening people and their family and their lives. Like that's the crazy part. When it's all said and done, like you can be mad, but when you're trying to threaten people's family and their pets or whatever, like what's wrong with you? Yeah, right. Like I haven't talked about that before, and we've mentioned stuff politically. Like I ain't going after like president's family or governor's son or whatever. They ain't got nothing to do with nothing, right? They're not making decisions. Like why?
In
Why
many
attack?
cases, they don't even politically agree. Because think about how many times you don't align with your parents on
Oh,
whatever
for
issue.
sure.
And I say most people, fair amount of people probably are like, yeah, whatever. They complete. Many times that's why you become the complete opposite of
Yeah.
whatever political party your parent liked, or what's some case whatever religion your parent was into it, because you had an experience that sent you in a totally different direction.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't mean
That's
you don't
totally
love
right.
them. It's just everybody has to make their own choices with
Hey,
these things.
generational differences, man.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess I can also say that, they'd previously talked about work that had already been started with the previous group. So there's the I guess we're calling it the bracket system that they're working on. Like that's still in discussion. Still talks about banning, unbanning stuff. Like those are still ongoing. There's a lot of cards that we're kind of looking at and talking about. So nothing more that's really public at this point because the group's only really been together for less than a week. It's like we've been in Discord, I think, for 5 days or something now. So people are like, okay, what's next? What are y'all doing? It's like, bro, we literally some of us just got introduced in the last couple days. So it's a brand new thing, but everybody's excited, everybody's energized. I think it's a while it's being, I guess we'll call it corporately run because that's how people view it. It's at least a positive kind of rejuvenated sort of feel. And maybe, honestly, maybe the way we were doing it before was antiquated for what it was. Because I've told people before, like to have that small of a group, of all volunteers on top of that, by the way,
Yeah.
you know, handling a thing that now is worth, I'm assuming, no less than a few couple tens of millions a year. Right? Like that's the thing because other formats have groups, like where you're talking about Popper has the Popper format panel or whatever, right? But while Popper is played, Popper isn't driving giant amounts of sales at a lot of stores. It's not selling a bunch of sealed product. It's not
Because
the
it's
thing people
designed
are
to be
showing up.
cheaply. So
Yeah, exactly. So I think you can get away with having that, right? I think it's more difficult the bigger it'd be like if you had that for standard. It would be kind of difficult to have a casual group of people kind of managing all of standard that's going on for every store and it's a major event for different qualifiers or whatever. Like it would just be hard. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I feel like Wizards is putting real resources behind it, giving it real attention. Now, I don't know how many people at Wizards yet are going to end up being assigned to the commander group of stuff or work. I guess that's still to be determined, because again, this whole thing's brand new. But yeah, so far so good. So there's one thing I want to address. Actually, I just remembered. Gavin Duggan, who was previously on the commander panel, but not now, by his choice, by the way. It wasn't like he was booted out uninvited. Also, for the record, because we like him, Shivam was not uninvited. He was welcome. Shivam, basically on his personal accord, because of all the crap he took last time, he's just taking a break from it for a while.
which is perfectly understandable.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. But I don't want people to feel like, oh, he should have been here. I don't know why people didn't go. No, he didn't want to be included, and the door is still open for him to be included in the future. Rightfully so. Dude's a nice dude. He is super invested. His opinion matters, but I get it. Like
Yeah.
he was attacked pretty seriously, so I don't fault him at all for wanting to take time
Yeah,
off.
there's anybody that needs a break.
Yeah, great dude. Sucks it happened to him. Seriously. But one of the things that Gavin brought up is there was some effectively it was like a boilerplate contract in some spots, replace some stuff for commander or whatever, like what your job duties are. But one of the things was he was concerned because there was a disparagement clause that was written legally, how it needs to be written, but basically sounds like it was in perpetuity or whatever. And that was something he wasn't comfortable with. Now, because he made it public, everybody else started freaking out over it of like, I can't believe Wizards is blah, blah, but like, I say almost everybody, at least of the people I know previously, a lot of them had already done work with Wizards, it had contracts with Wizards, and they were all willing to sign this. So it's not that big a deal. Like I have literally worked at Wizards, I've worked away from it. Hell, we've said stuff about Wizards on this show, and they know it, and they don't care. Like it does not stop me from getting to do commentary. It's not stopped me from getting to do stuff
And
on their channel.
understand it basically says you just can't use anything that's not public knowledge.
Yes,
Like basically
yes.
just stuff which is fair because obviously you would have access to stuff that, for example,
Oh
I
yeah.
wouldn't have access to. So yeah, you can't.
Oh, for sure. And I'm pretty sure when I did stuff with Facebook in whatever that was, like 2021 or so, like some of that language is in their contracts. Like it's just business. Like if you're going to possibly see things or get access to information that the general public will not have, and it's trusting you to not go use that in some foul way against the company. Now, legally, if we found out that, I don't know, the secret sauce to people buying magic cards was made with puppy blood, then like if we went public and told people about it, like they would have a hard time defending that in court. Like obviously the public would need to know about puppy blood being in magic cards or whatever, right? So it's a thing that I don't even remember the last time I've seen that clause used to defend anything actually even legally because I was trying to think of examples for people and I couldn't even remember one recently. So it has to be something pretty effed up and has to be a really big deal, or you have to just be like, all right, I'm going to show all of these numbers and all this stuff from the books of private information. And now it makes it hard for Wizards to do some level of business. And then they would probably go after you. But otherwise, it's not going to be a thing. Like, it hasn't been a thing to this point. I'm still friends with people at Wizards. Like, it's just never been a thing. So,
Like it, when I write about video games, many times there's some form of embargo,
mhm.
or you can't talk about it until such and such date, or as long as it's not something crazy like we had with Black Myth Wukong, where hey, you can't talk about Chinese politics and you can't insert feminism in your review. Like, okay, yeah, that's crazy, and they got called out for the fact that was crazy. What y'all are talking about sounds fairly industry standard.
Yeah, it's really not a big deal. But I get it. If you don't feel comfortable with it or you're wondering it might be an issue, cool. Totally. Don't sign it. Don't be part of it. Like you should never if anything in any contract ever makes you feel weird, don't sign it. Like if you have any potential curiosities that you can't solve or figure out reading it, don't sign it. Right. I totally understand. But again, people like me, Josh Lee Kwai, Olivia, whatever, like we've all done different things with Wizards over the years and it's never been a problem. And again, they also have their own shows, they have their own podcasts, like they all say whatever, and Wizard still knows it and works with them and even sponsors stuff with them. So not really a thing. So just want to put that out there and put it to rest.
And we all see everybody from Adam Schefter at ESPN, like unnamed sources are a thing that
Mm-hmm.
happen all the time. Some of that is because part of what Schefter does is the reason he can find out what the Broncos are doing is because he knows what the Chargers are doing. He trades info.
Oh, you know he
That's
does.
the only way you can get to find out who's getting traded or who's getting drafted before everybody else. So yeah, it's don't even get me started on we already have, but yeah, there's
Oh, it's a
all
whole
manner
thing.
of tricks of the journalistic trade, so to speak.
Yeah, so none of it's really new. It's not a concern. And I will also say, I can't by rule show you the actual messages, but we have had discussions and Gavin's I think he put it actually even in the message he posted to the public of the announcement, but he even said privately, specifically, we do not want you to change your opinions, the way you present stuff, whatever. That's why you were included. So keep doing what you're doing. If you don't like something, feel free to talk about it. Like we've been told there is no backlash for that outright. So I can't give you any more assurances than that. Like this, we have it in writing if they ever try to make a case out of it. So there is that. But all right, let's get into the soapbox. So I want to follow up on some stuff from last week because I talked a little bit about how people get these feel bads from conventions or whatever. But I kind of wanted to, especially with Vegas coming up, I started thinking about how people interact, especially with creators, right? Because we're in an interesting spot with gaming because all of our creators or the people we follow or idolize or whatever are accessible for the most part, right? It's not like when we like a quarterback on a football team or some movie star, like you might see them every once in a while, or maybe if you get in line to pay $20 for an autograph or whatever, right? That might be your only interaction. When we go to these conventions, like everybody's there. They're doing simple meet and greets. They're sitting down playing games with people. They're taking pictures and signing stuff, whatever. So there's some things I think people need to be aware of. Like one of the biggest ones, and I saw a couple of different creators mention this as well, so it's top of mind for a lot of folks. Don't invite yourself to things with them if you were not invited. Like that's just one, that's just bad etiquette, period. First off, whether it's somebody that's well known or not. But
You
like
wouldn't
don't
invite yourself to somebody's wedding,
yeah,
or I hope you wouldn't anyway.
it's just weird, right? If you see somebody discussing dinner plans, because they pick up their phone and somebody message them or whatever, call them, like, don't be like, oh, hey, man, I'm free at 5. Can I go? Like that's because now you put them in a bad spot. Because now, like, if they say no, they look like a jerk, or they have to make up some excuse or whatever. Or it's just like, if they have an open spot and they want other people, they will invite you. Part of it, too, you have to accept is that for some of these folks, this is also the only time they're going to get to see their friends, right? There's people that when I go to these conventions, this is literally the only time I see some of them. So some of them mark off some time like, hey, man, I'm going to do lunch at 1 tomorrow, trying to bring 4 or 5 other people from the group or whatever. Cool. And I'll go meet with them and I'll have lunch maybe. But I'm also understanding that, hey, people have their own time, they have their stuff planned. Let them have that. Also, be courteous of their time. Like, we love interacting with people. I literally talk to people all weekend at these events. But man, I have had times where dudes want to talk for like an hour. Like, I mean, just they'll like, oh, well, what about this topic? Or what about this question? Or it's like, and you're politely kind of like slowly sidestepping as the conversation's going on, trying to like get to the next spot or the next person. Or you're doing that thing where you're like checking your phone and like, oh yeah, I gotta make sure I'm at some place. Hold on a second. You're trying not to be rude and just be like, bro, look, we've been talking for an hour, man. Like, I got other things I got to do. I got other people I got to see. Don't get me wrong. Like, we like the interactions, but at some point, this is also a business trip for us. So you got to let us do business. Those are some things we don't talk a lot about, and it keeps coming up. So just like, hey, just understand, be polite, be courteous of other people's time. Don't be afraid to ask people, like, hey, if you have a minute, like, we're going to start a game in about 20 minutes if you're free. And then they can just yay or no or tell you if they've got something going on, whatever. You'd be surprised. A lot of times they'll say yes. So nothing wrong with asking. But again, if you're inviting them into your space or something you want to do with them, great. Don't intrude on their plans. And they'll like you a lot more. Trust me. All right. I'm going to leave it at that. But let's hand it over to you and see what you got.
All right, I feel like there's some controversy where there probably shouldn't be, but Pro Wrestling Illustrated does a list of the top, I believe, 500 men and 500 women. Number one on the top 500 women wrestlers of past years, Timeless Tony Storm. And for anybody that hasn't seen her, the gimmick is basically she is like, I guess, a silent film star from, I guess it'd be what, 19 teens, 20s era. And really, it is by far one of the best characters going in the
She's
business
done up
right
like a for those you need a visual. She's done up kind of like an early Marilyn Monroe. If you're looking for a
now. Yeah.
visual, she's kind of got that look going for
And hold on, I don't know if hopefully y'all can't see that. League of Legends is trying to update in front of me. Let me get it out of the way.
her. No, it's not showing up.
Okay, computer stuff. But yeah, anyway, there are people that had beat, and I get it. These lists are obviously subjective, especially when you're talking about something like professional wrestling and people's characters. But one of the criticisms that kept coming up was, well, she's only over because of her character. You just described every professional wrestler pretty much who has
So
ever
basically,
lived,
she did her job and got rewarded for it, and people are mad.
right? I mean, were you a fan of the Ringmaster if you watch wrestling, or were you a fan of Stone Cold Steve Austin? Did,
Yeah,
did, did you like
exactly.
Undertaker during his Texas Red phase? He wouldn't have still been working had Texas Red been where he stopped. That's the whole idea, is to come up, even guys and girls whose character is that they have no character. That's a character. The
Yeah.
fact that they don't have the flamboyant character, that's a thing too. These are all conscious business decisions. And again,
You know,
to
though,
me, her work is not just, it compares. Really, she's one of my top 10 favorites, men or women working right now. So yeah, especially when you compare her to just the female version, yes, she is doing phenomenal work, far and away number one in my opinion.
I think in general, this kind of shows that sexism does still exist in a lot of places, right? Because when they put somebody up as number one for the dudes, there's usually a little bit of controversy, but everybody kind of goes like, "Yeah, they're still pretty awesome." So whatever. Like I get it. I don't think so, but I get it. Right? It felt like there was a lot more argument over Tony
Yeah,
Storm, and I didn't
just
understand because we both said there's really only like two others that you can even consider.
yeah.
You
I
know
mean,
what I
I
mean?
understand argument for Rhea Ripley, but then Rhea was out for a long time
Yeah,
with
the other
injuries.
two have
So
been injured at some point during the year. That's the other problem, right? So it's just like, who else are you going to give it to? Like she, not to discredit her and her work, but she largely can win on default, right? Of the other women that were solid, they didn't even have a good full year,
And
to
some
even
people
compare
also
to.
say, well, she's only over because AEW is so terrible. That's credit to her. She's working for the company that, as
Yeah,
we've
that's
discussed on here, the company that is in a lot of cases not doing the best work creatively. That even shows, just really, she is doing it herself.
what that
She
feels like.
is,
That feels as dumb as all those people that say like Wizards is killing the game after they just announced like we did 1.3 billion in sales or whatever. You know what I mean? Like those things don't add up. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to discredit a thing when they're being successful despite what you don't like or whatever. Like, come on, man.
she
Like
is
that's just
that
silly.
person. We talk about how you want hate or love. What you don't want is them going to get a Coke or going to the restroom
Yep.
when you're on. And she is somebody where when I see her on camera, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and see what crazy thing she is going to say or do next. And that's really, like you said, that is the job of a pro wrestler. Make me put the remote down. Make me not go. Make me something. What are they going to do next?
And I'll say that like again, we're pro wrestling fans, obviously. But if you're not, go look up a clip of Timeless Tony Storm. Toni, by the way, is how she spells
Yeah.
her name. But Timeless Tony Storm. And the gimmick is just great. Like even if you don't like professional wrestling, you will look at that gimmick and you can immediately go, "Okay, I get it." You know what I mean? Like you look at that and go, I get why
Everything's in
people
black and
think that.
white when she comes out. She's got all the long, flowing, movie star. And because she works for Turner Broadcasting, they use Ben Mankiewicz from
Mm-hmm.
Turner Classic Movies, almost like her own special. Brilliant. And by the way, she used to work for WWE, and who doesn't love a story where somebody who didn't, for whatever reason,
Yeah,
didn't
redemption
catch on with
story.
one company, yeah, just
Yeah,
incredible work. Again, to her credit, that she didn't find an audience with one company, went somewhere else. A lot of people, if they don't make it in WWE, like, oh well, I'm going to go do something else. Wrestling is because again, there's no guarantee you're going to get a contract where you make as much in some other company. So for a lot of people, and I get it, because these people do extreme damage to their bodies and their psyche. So yeah, a lot of people just what have a dollar amount where they say below this it simply isn't worth it. So again, for her, she bet on herself, and I love seeing that with people.
I feel like content creators can learn something from her.
Absolutely.
Of like, if you're going to have a gimmick or you're going to do a thing or you're going to have a niche that you're making your content in or whatever, like buy into it yourself, right? Go all in because that's the only way that gimmick works, right? You have to go all in, everything you do, the way you speak, the way you dress, like support the gimmick, right? I've told people that before because it's weird, even in content where you're like, you watch somebody who's trying to tell you about finance, but they're in like a busted t-shirt and ripped jeans or whatever. And it's just like, okay, so I'm supposed to listen to you. Why? Like when I can see the trash in the background in your living room, like, come on,
Unless
man.
they make a billion on GameStop,
Well,
what I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you're gonna lose
exactly.
it. But in
But that's what
most
I'm
cases,
saying.
you're
Like,
absolutely right.
but you got to buy into the gimmick, whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like I can't be the chill, laid back guy, whatever, doing magic content, and then just put a bunch of rage bait stuff out there to get clicks, right? It doesn't make sense, right? So yeah, good on her, man. That's really it. Like she's earned it. Congratulations. But it's that time. Let's talk about what we learned this week because there's a couple. Yours is a little bit sad. I think mine is just surprising. So what do you got?
Yeah, Fernando Valenzuela, legend of the Los Angeles Dodgers, or just pro baseball legend in general, passed away this week at the age of, I believe, 63. And it just too soon, but I mean, he did so much. And for anybody, I'm fortunate enough to be old enough to remember Fernando Mania, and it just changed really the whole culture of the Los Angeles Dodgers. But believe it or not, because a lot of people, especially in our younger audience, there was a time in the Los Angeles Dodgers, even though they play in LA in a place called, of all things, Chavez Ravine, they had really no connection
Mm-mm.
with the Mexican community. Part of that is because, they kind of pushed some people out of the neighborhood to build that stadium. That's a whole other story. But they, for a long time, basically the owner said his direction to the scouts was to go find them a Mexican Sandy Koufax. They tried to, you'll never find another Sandy Koufax at all, let alone one in a specific category that you would like them to fit into. But as a matter of fact, they're the Dodgers, and they're right there. They, for the most part, weren't even scouting Mexico at the time. But because the owner, to his credit, realized, hey, we really need to be doing more to appeal to the Mexican audience, figured that out. We're fortunate enough to find a guy that was just Fernando Mania was something incredible. It's just, because he wasn't somebody that looked like the typical, athlete of the day.
Oh
If I
no,
may
definitely
paraphrase
not.
that, right. He was pudgy.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that's why they relate because he looked like their uncle. And he was 19. I think when he started being, but he still had that portly build. He looked like your uncle, your cousin, looked like literally anybody that you maybe knew. All of a sudden, found their way to the pitcher's mound and started striking everybody out.
Where are you going? I'm going to the game. I got to go see Theo Fernando.
Right? Saw an interview with Danny Trejo where he said, the whole culture changed. Where if a police officer stopped you and you were basically, it wasn't, hey, what are you doing? Why are you around here? It's like, why aren't you at the game? It's
Yep.
Fernando pitching today. Why aren't you at the stadium right now?
I'll tell you though, like that's a perfect example of when we talk about, I mean, people hate hearing the term diversity, but like this is why it exists, right? Like somebody identified, hey, we don't have anybody relatable for them, so they're just not coming to the game as much. So you go find somebody who's relatable who happen to be fantastic, by the way, and then they're still able to make money because now you have a whole generation, a generation and a half, that grew up with him being their pitcher, right? So now people are showing up, they're bringing their sons, their nephews, their
Right?
grandkids, whatever. Like that's a big deal.
It
That's
was
money.
huge, and like as many people mentioned, as been seeing the obits and the pieces over the past day or so, it, this hadn't happened before. For the entire city of LA to be cheering a Mexican kid that a month ago they had never heard of. He was a rock star. I mean, it
Hmm.
was something unbelievable. And again, because it changed this entire culture for the team. As many people said, he was as important to LA sports as Magic Johnson was, as Kobe Bryant was. He just became an icon. I'm sure MLB The Show will give us probably 99 overall Fernando
Oh,
card
there's
here
definitely
really
going to be
soon,
in-game tributes. You have no doubt
with
about
all
that.
the attributes and just so yeah, definitely
You
shout
know,
out to him. He will definitely be missed.
I will say this, we talk a lot about, if a football player dies at 60 or whatever, we're like, ah, man, physical issues, this, that, and the other. Like, it's kind of rare that I hear about baseball players dying so young. I feel like it's usually like, oh, this dude died at 85 or this dude died at 78 or, they're up there a little bit before they pass. So that's also what makes this a little bit unfortunate because baseball players tend to live a bit longer. They don't
Yeah.
they don't have the beatings on their body, that football players have.
I mean, so many coaches would encourage kids, if they're trying to decide between football and baseball. Hey, really, baseball, you can play, until you're almost 50 if you can get.
Yeah,
Hey,
you can play into your 40s and you make a ton of money per year. You don't have to be one of the star players on the team to get that $10 million a year contract in baseball. It seems like you just got to have one or two good years before your contract's renewed,
yeah.
then you can get paid.
And then some people, like Dion or Bo, are the freakish athletes that
Oh
can do
yeah, yeah,
both. And in Dion's case, on the same day, leave the Falcons game, go to the Braves games. It's just wild
yeah.
stuff.
That was crazy. Now I'm gonna tell people I found out something that I didn't even know existed that should have been a big deal that's gone already. But Netflix apparently put together a AAA game studio, which apparently had big plans that they were going to put out some major titles, 60 $70 games, DLC, the whole nine yards. And as far as this article is concerned that I found, they never made a product and they disbanded the team. Now, they're moving some team members around to other stuff and they're still going to be involved in video games, but not top level, you know, major title stuff. But this is kind of wild because I'm looking at the list of people they had a former Overwatch executive producer, they had the Halo creative lead, they had dudes from Blizzard, they had dudes from Sony. Or a woman from Sony, sorry. But tons of big names around the industry that effectively they assembled the Avengers
Right.
and we're like, all right, we're gonna make some video games, and then
And
somehow
as we
nothing
learned in
happened.
Infinity War, even the Avengers lose sometimes.
Yeah, I guess so, man. Because I'm reading through this and I'm like, there's nothing. They were apparently gonna make a whole original IP that was gonna be owned by Netflix. There apparently was some big plan, but they never got on rails to start moving. And then they just decided, all right, I guess that's it.
If only it were as simple as hire brilliant minds, spend a bunch of money, and make good video games. Unfortunately, it has never been quite that simple. Big studios fail all the time. You probably saw that game Sony just released Concord, where I think it was out less than two
Oh
weeks, and they
yeah,
just shuttered it because I mean, when I say nobody, I'm talking about nobody was playing
dude.
this joint.
I just heard about that recently. I think they said at peak the servers only had like 600 players.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
like,
that's
wow.
Sony. So if
Yeah.
they can fail that hard, pretty much anybody can.
Now, for those who don't know, Concord, from my understanding, also took like 8 years to develop or something. It was like in
Yeah,
development for a long time.
yeah.
So it was already dated before it even made it to the finish line. And it had so much going against it. But
And
to
there's
your
so much competition now in the hero shooter genre. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
Marvel is dropping one next month, so that was kind of the thing that I'm sure they were all afraid of. It was like, okay, yeah, in the case of Overwatch Concord, we made up our own heroes. Man, I hope nobody makes a game with actual Marvel super or DC superheroes. And lo and behold, now we got Marvel Rivals dropping it. Overwatch is worried. They basically started the genre and they're worried. So yeah, everybody else.
But again, like when you're talking about these games, you bring in these people that top level, you're doing stuff, this is what's popular, whatever, but just having a popular genre and having the best names just isn't enough. Like we've talked about on the show before, right? You got to have a variety of things come together. Some of it's timing, you got to be right place, right time sometimes, but some of it's also you got to ride a trend, you got to get the right people on board, like sometimes the right personality promoting your stuff. Like there's so many things that have to go right. And we see it all the time. Like tons of these games, like you've said before, like some are even winning awards because they're great, but nobody plays them.
Yeah.
And it's just like
Or it's not enough people to make whatever arbitrary number the company had in their head.
also true. Also true. So yeah, I don't know. I only thing I could find out, the studio didn't even seem like it had a real name yet, which is crazy to me if you're gonna bring in all those people. But it was just codenamed Blue. So I don't know why, because Netflix logo is red, so that don't even make sense. But I mean, like, is what it is. But yeah, interesting rabbit hole. If you want to check it out, something I didn't even know existed until earlier today, or yesterday. So that kind of surprised me. But let's get into our topics for the week. Hey, guess what, Brian? Mono red pissed people off.
What a shock.
Yeah. Enough so that in best of one, people complained enough about it that they decided they're going to take Ley Line of Resonance and put it on the ban list. So you can't play it in best of one arena games. And nobody seemed too upset nor surprised by it. I think they're going to keep an eye on it for best of three. We have the World Championships happening this weekend in Vegas. So if it overperforms there, I'm sure it'll say something. But if it doesn't, probably nothing's going to happen in best of three. So yeah, best of one players on Arena rejoiced this week. They were happy. It's just kind of one of those things. People don't like mono red already as it is. It's just one of those decks that's always been around, always annoyed people. And then when you give it a tool to just high roll every once in a while and just end games early, that upsets people even more. So like that doesn't surprise me. I mean, what do you expect, right? Nothing more's coming out of that.
When it hits, it hits. But for the most of the time, it doesn't. But when it does,
That was kind of my thing when I played against it is when they got the draw and you didn't get it, like the game's over in 2 or 3 turns. But like if you killed one or two early creatures, sometimes they just did nothing. So my bigger issue is while that card existed, you got a larger percentage of non-games. It's like I played 2 cards and then my opponent pretty much did nothing for the rest of the game and then I won. Or I didn't get the removal to interact with them. They killed me before I played like my third land. And it's like that's not fun for anybody. Even if it isn't a crazy high win percentage, it's enough of a negative play experience that just doesn't need to exist. And I'm okay with that. But since I mentioned it, MagicCon Vegas is this weekend. And my goodness, it's going to be busy. It's already been sold out for a while now. Lots of stuff going on. People I'm seeing making their plans and doing all that stuff. I do have some, actually, I guess I could show them on camera if people want to see the nifty things if you run into me that I can give you. So I got these new little treasure tokens. If people want those, I think those will show up on camera. There we go. So like got those and I have my PowrDragn stickers. So if
there you
people want to
go.
get a little sticker, I have stickers to hand people. So yeah, if you find I don't know, it might be like a Where's Waldo situation because we're gonna be all over the place any given time in the middle of a crowd. So yeah, feel free to find me. But yeah, I'll be doing that. I'll be doing some stuff with the VIPs, a couple of meet and greets, and otherwise just kind of making content from the show floor because right now the expectations are that there's going to be a lot of stuff announced in Vegas. Obviously, lots of stuff for next year because we don't even know the set names for everything for next year yet. I don't think people realize that. Like the next full set is due probably in February, and we don't even know what it's called yet. We just know it's some type of death race set. That's the only thing we've heard, which sounds awesome, but we don't know nothing about it. So I'm sure we'll hear about that, and they'll probably lay out all the stuff for the next year. Oh, actually, it's not true. They did say something about us potentially going back to Tarkir, so that might be a thing at some point next year. We don't know when. We don't know what the set looks like, and then of course we know that there's going to be Final Fantasy, and there's going to be Marvel stuff, and I'm sure they'll show like 20 cards for each of those. So yeah, I would stay close to your computers because there's going to be news all weekend, I'm sure, with a lot of previews for so. And what they've done before, I've seen, is they've been really smart and they kind of like sprinkle them out throughout the weekend. So like, there's the big presentation of stuff, and then occasionally they'll be like, oh, and then we have previews at the end of this thing, or during the World Championships, they'll have one or two previews, right? So people are tuning in to see what it is and they don't miss it, which is a smart way to use previews since you know people are excited about it. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of news from Vegas, and I think sadly that might overshadow a lot of stuff from Vegas because I think that's going to dominate the conversations. But it's to be expected. But Brian, you've been playing for a little bit now, and since we did bring up one of the things I didn't mention is they are going to be talking about Magic Foundations, I'm sure, at Vegas because we only have a handful of cards previewed. And I don't know, how do you feel about this with them making it a nostalgic feeling set, right? Because we're getting an old Dejani, one of the original Johnnies are coming back as a planeswalker. Vivian, from when we first got introduced to Vivian, is coming back as a planeswalker that people played. And then I guess we can call it a Pro Tour winning Liliana as well. Actually, I don't know Pro Tour winning. I think it top aided, but a Liliana card that people like in Dread Horde General coming back. So how do you feel about that? Because I think I hadn't really thought about this being a nostalgic set, but it might actually be. And when we find out about everything,
God, I've been around long enough to be a to be a target for nostalgia. How'd that happen? But apparently, it has happened.
yeah, man, it's been hell. I mean, once you're around more than like for games, once you've been around more than 10 years,
Oh,
you know, like
absolutely. Because most of the games I played didn't make it to 10 years. So yeah, I guess it
oh,
was
dude, we could do a whole show on just games we played that died. Hell, some did, most didn't make it 5 years.
true. And I guess
You
that's
know,
probably the industry average. Is probably less than 5 years for stuff that's not one of the big three.
yeah. I mean, because that was one of the things when we talked about why Raw Deal was considered a success is because it went 7 years.
Right? That's a lifetime in this industry,
Yeah, which is wild when you think about it, because that's like one almost 1/5 as long as Magic at this point.
which is, I mean, and and ironic because one of the things we talk about in wrestling is the 7 year rule, after which your audience is for the gimmick has grown up, and you can recycle it.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
really, the
right
only reason
now,
that one failed though was a licensing agreement. My understanding was as the game had taken off and WB realized like there's more people interested in doing more card game stuff, the contract was going to be more expensive for the renewals, so it just didn't get renewed. I guess
it's the
profits
most
or whatever.
the most WWE way ever for a game to end.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's kind of cool though, right? When we're talking about nostalgia points, because you don't now that we don't have like the core sets every year to reprint things and all that, like we don't really have that opportunity. And I feel like I hope this, and we know it's going to have Lana War Elf, which people like already, which means you probably won't get Birds of Paradise. My concern though is, does this mean we're going to get stuff like Lightning Bolt back? I don't know if I want Lightning Bolt in standard right now. You know, we've had giant growth recently, so that's not that big of a surprise. Could we get something like a, dare I say, like Swords to Plowshares or something like that? You know, just a straight up terror as a removal spell, like the old school thing. Like maybe,
And
you
it's
know,
important, I guess, to have this because we're going to have so many universes beyond sets now where we're not going to see, Lana War elves and Johnny and things like that. So that makes Foundations even more important in the grand scheme of things.
that's a good thing to bring up because I don't think people have really thought about that. Is like, while this set is going to be around for 5 years in standard legal, you're right. It does fill that role of here's stuff that's familiar, whether familiar in flavor, in art, or whatever, or familiar in cards that again, you're rotating back into the game at some point. There's going to be a handful of cards you already recognize and can play with. Hell, you might already own some of them, right? Which makes it even easier for you to build a standard deck. So it's a really cool idea. I don't know how it's going to work long term. I don't know what sales are going to look like because for a set that's going to be standard legal for 5 years, I'm assuming, and this is just me assuming, that it'll be at least printed for the better part of 2.5 to 3 years. So there's enough just in the system for when people want it to be able to build with. So there's no like rush to get it. And 50% of the set's going to be reprints anyway. So there's a lot of new things going on with this set that we don't really know what's going to happen, but it's a cool idea. I'm into it. It's got a sweet looking logo. So there's that. But yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But let's get to the dinner table because this is going to be a fun conversation. Because I for real don't know what your answer is to this. But with the news of the bannings and the new commander format panel and all that, what banning, whether it be in games, sports, anything you're choosing, just something that was changed or taken away, your call, that you really liked or disliked? Because, man, I don't know what your answer is going to be here. So I'm curious.
I think the one that bothers me the most now is some ruling bodies trying to figure out trying to figure out people's gender for them and then applying rules because of that. Like just that needs to go away because
Yeah, that's a little weird.
I
That's
mean
weird.
scientists are telling us like whatever whatever distinction you're trying to use probably is not the right one. We had the horrible situation during the Olympics where
Yeah.
where the poor athlete was female has always been female, and somebody incorrectly misgendered her, and then everybody else, well, not everybody, but a lot of people just started sharing it, and that's how misinformation spreads.
Though, good on her. I saw that she got a lawsuit suing two of the people who
Yeah.
perpetuated it and probably is going to win. So
Oh, I would.
good, you know?
I can't imagine she wouldn't win because what is more slanderous than somebody trying to say that you're out there out there cheating at the sports you've chosen on purpose? That's is one of
Well,
the
even beyond that, that led to like death threats and all kinds
all,
of other
all
stuff.
of that.
That's the real concerning part. So, yeah, I, she deserves whatever money she gets from that. Like, I ain't even mad about it. I for real, I've been thinking about this since we started the show of let's like, what would I pick for this? And man, I don't know because there's so many. There's like the crazy new kickoff rule we have in the NFL right now. Hell, I just saw one the other day. Apparently, at some, I guess, meeting of executives or something for NFL, they're talking about trying to change the width of the goalpost or something, which would be insane to me.
Like smaller or
Yeah,
bigger?
smaller, which sounds nuts. Just because kickers are getting too good, I guess. Like I don't know, but if I had to pick one, it's probably a sporting thing because most of the stuff in games I think is pretty obvious or justified when it happens, not too crazy. Because I was thinking about like game rules that have changed for like tabletop or whatever trading card game. It's always something that we go, yeah, that probably need to be banned or whatever. I think for me, it's how we approach head trauma in sports now.
Definitely.
I think the change of like not letting like if you even get anything that looks like a concussion now in the NFL, like they take you off the field, you have to sit out a set number of plays. You have to have a doctor on the sideline that makes sure you're good. You because back in the day, it'd be like, get some smelling salts. Who's the president? All right, I'm
Unless you're
good.
the Bills. Apparently, the Bills did that like last week. They brought the smell and
Oh,
salt, and
yeah.
Josh Allen was supposedly okay again. So I think they'll be investigated.
Yeah. So I mean, we're doing more to protect people's health, and I think to me that's the biggest thing. Now, that being said, there's still the controversy with Tua, and he's not wanting to wear the Guardian helmet, and that's a whole discussion. And whatever.
Yeah.
He's had his what fifth concussion in 6 years or something like that. So like, I don't know.
Depending on who you go, and that's another thing where they basically are still arguing about whether one of his concussions was a concussion. And
Yeah, that's true too.
if you got a team and a doctor that are going to openly decide to not follow the rules, because as far as I know, the Dolphins didn't really. Now, obviously, they changed a lot of rules after that, but I don't know that they ever really suffered any penalty, of course, other than him getting concussed again. I
Yeah.
guess it was the only, and that again more of a punishment on him than it is them.
Yeah, there's so many though when we talk about like rule changes because like I said, there's that even again talking about like pro wrestling, they have a substance abuse policy now for steroids and whatever. That's kind of important. Like hell, even in Magic, we've changed the amount of money so people can make more just qualifying for worlds or whatever. I mean, such a big list and an open ended question on things, but yeah, there's a lot of good rules out there. And yeah, I want to say thanks for everybody. Y'all seem to still get through the episode last week, even though we had some technical issues. So
We
thank you,
appreciate it.
for those of you that listened. And apparently they enjoyed the dumb story I told them about a guy calling to eventually get a burrito. So that was a, a fun one to talk about. So I guess if we run out of stuff for the dinner table, we can always do story time, and people love story time. So that's the
Yep.
thing. But Brian, when's your brother they can find you out on the social media machines?
All right. I am Brian Sonic on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and you can read my writing over at Game Sided.
Oh, and brother, if you don't have one yet, we got to get you on Blue Sky because apparently
What even is that?
everybody's it's the new, not the new, but a Twitter alternative because all this stuff happened with Elon Musk and he's starting to want to make it where people you block can still see your stuff and everything else, and like people started jumping ship. I got like 250 new followers this past week on Blue Sky for no reason. I was about to say out of the blue, but that's too on the nose. But yeah, you may want to check it out. But anyway, if you want to find me everywhere, it's PowrDragn, PowrDragn. And again, if you want to get some free goodies, come find me at Vegas. I'll have plenty to hand out. But otherwise, just watch me online. I'll be there. But as always, wherever you're watching or listening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Please remember to take care of yourselves and your family. Remember to be awesome, but even more importantly, be awesome to each other.